Yeah, it's a really great question, and again, part of what I'm seeing at least happen, at least in the United States, is that they're already, many of them are already ready to be a part of that community, and it's especially evident in those places where, I mean, the whole concept of food hubs now is just spreading all over the United States. Again, if you're interested in some of the information around there, there's a group out on the West Coast that call themselves the Food Commons. And again, you can just Google the Food Commons, and they put together a document about how to do this. They have now made how should I call this? It's not a contract. It's a kind of living arrangement with the city of Fresno. And the city of Fresno has now decided that they want to become one of the models on the ground of how you put this kind of consumer, farmer, food hub system together. And they've already now gotten 2 major grants from a foundation that's supporting this, so it's starting to happen. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say, this is going to be it, they'll put it all together and it'll be perfect. But the fact that this is even happening, I could not have imagined 5 years ago. And the reason that it's happening is because you've got this new population of people, particularly in our urban communities. There's and this is going to be very interesting politically. Right now, and I'm sure this is true in Canada as well in the United States, but like I say, I know the United States best. Right now in the United States, all of our public policy is basically determined by the commodity agriculture and its vested interests. And what do I mean by that? I mean the input suppliers, the food processors, the commodity farmers. They all have a lot of power in Washington, D.C. By virtue of the campaign contributions, etc., that they can all make. And so they pretty much determine what happens in the way of public policy. And I don't mean this to picture this as they're the bad guys and we're the good guys. Not at all. If you think about the situation that they're all in, and let me just give you a concrete example. I was part of the Pew Commission for Industrial Animal Agriculture that spent 2 years looking at industrial animal agriculture, and we issued a report a couple of years ago. And as part of that, our commission was given the opportunity to visit some of our major food processing facilities. And the first food processing facility that we visited was a Tyson chicken poultry processing operation in Arkansas. And when I walked into that building, and here was this 4-story high building, with these chickens, on these assembly line kinds of processing facilities going on through this system. And I looked at this infrastructure and I thought, my God, these people have invested billions of dollars in this, and they're not going to listen to us. And if you think about this, the kind of food system that our input suppliers, our food processors, and to a large extent our farmers put together was exactly what we told them we wanted. We told them we wanted our food fast, convenient, and cheap, right? And that's exactly what they gave us. Now they've invested these billions of dollars in this infrastructure, and our farmers are in their 60s, and now they want to go to them and say, we don't like how this worked out, and we'd like to have you make some changes. Well, if you put yourself in that position, I don't think any of us would be very excited about making those kinds of transitions. So this is why, again, I think urban agriculture, I think all of these other alternatives, as they emerge, the permaculture, etc., as they emerge from the bottom up, and it's going to be, and we're seeing this again in the United States, it's this new generation of young people now who are mostly in their late teens to early 30s, and it's to a large extent, it's the farmers who are in their 30s and 40s and 50s, which makes up a lot of the farm organizations. The Northern Plains Sustainable Agriculture Society, the Nebraska Sustainable Agriculture Society, the Practical Farmers of Iowa and in Iowa. All of these farm groups who are sort of, quote, sustainable agriculture groups, they're made up of these farmers who know they can't continue to do this through the end of their career, and they're looking for ways to make the transition and stay in business. So I think what we need to do is develop the public policies that support these new initiatives, that work with the farmers, the young farmers and the farmers in the Middle Ages who want to make these transitions. And personally, I think it's morally the right thing to do to support the farmers who are in their 60s to finish their careers what they're doing, because they're doing what we ask them to do. And then the food industry is going to have to make its transition, and I think that will in fact come relatively quickly. And the example which I used this morning about the feedlot operations now, because they know that they can't continue to do it on an economic basis, and so it gets back to the collapse thing you were talking about this morning. And it's not a surprise that you have companies like in the retail sector now, companies like Walmart now that are looking to, change at least part of their food system. Now there's another interesting thing here which we need to keep on the table though, and again Michael Porter made this point already back in a book that he published back in 1990 called The Competitive Advantage of Nations. And he pointed out back then that there are two ways for any enterprise to be competitive in a global economy. One is to be the lowest cost supplier of an undifferentiated product. And that's the Walmart model. Every truck that you see, the delivery truck for Walmart has its moniker is lowest price always, right? So that was their model, the lowest price of an undifferentiated commodity. And the second approach, Michael Porter said, was to be the supplier of a product of superior value, either because of the quality of the product, the attributes that come with the product, or the service that comes with the product. And he claimed that you could be equally competitive either way. And then he made an interesting observation. He said, while it's not impossible, it's extremely difficult for the same firm to do both. And so we're going to see how that plays itself out. But I think that the business world is recognizing that just continuing to do business the way they've done in the past 50 years is not going to work in the future. And again, the fact that people like Michael Porter are stepping up in front now and saying, here's the new world that we're operating in, I think the business world will pay attention to that. And we could very well see changes in the business world take place faster than we could have imagined. But consumers and farmers in places where they're allowed to have conversations with each other, I think, to a large extent are already there.
I was just mentioning a table here with you before, but we kind of have a farm sort of like Joel Salatin's, where we're growing and direct marketing into Saskatoon and Regina. And this is where we feel our whole is sort of I'm not sure what the hiccup in our whole model is trying to grow grain for chickens. We're not growing grain, but we're thinking of moving down that path of growing our own grain organically, obviously, but I'm not always. Our background is holistic management, and I'm really interested on how, what ways you know of to get a complete system going on a sizable scale. It's one thing to do urban, where you have a small garden and a few chickens and whatever, but like is Joel Salatin, I'm very familiar with him, I have all his books and all that stuff, but he's still buying local grain, and is the same fertility kept up on those farmers growing fields? Like it seems like we can build the fertility on our farm at the expense of somebody else's farm, and I'd like to see more of a complete system on a bigger scale, where we have the opportunity to raise 4,000 chickens in Saskatchewan now without having quota, and we do the free-range pigs as well. And anyway, I'm just looking for other ideas, and I don't want to be so narrow-minded as to only see one little problem, but how I can see this as a bigger picture and what people are doing out there.
Yeah, again, really important issues, and Let me just share a couple of things that I'm aware of that are happening that I think can speak to at least some of that. One is a good friend of mine, his name is Steve Jones, who's a wheat breeder at Washington State University. And Steve has been intrigued for a long time about the different kinds of breeds of wheat that have been available, some of which we've lost, but many of which are still available because, different farmers or others have kept them alive. And so for most of his life, he was doing wheat breeding for, commodity farmers, who primarily were interested in one thing, and that was yield. But in the back of Steve's mind, he was always concerned about quality and these other kinds of things. Well, what's happened now is he's coming closer. He's not at the end of his career yet, but closer to it. Is he has found a group of farmers now in Northwest Washington State. I haven't visited yet, but some of my friends have. And these farmers have now become intrigued by, this second way of being competitive in the global economy that Michael Porter had talked about. And that is, how can they produce higher quality of wheat and do less of it and do it in a way that they can increase their income. And the farmers have now invested in putting together a processing facility that processes these new varieties of wheat that now they have developed markets for. And it looks at this point like it's going to be hugely successful. And there are even chefs, one of them a friend of mine, who have collected some of their own varieties of seeds from various places in the world and taken them out to Steve, and Steve is now growing them out and naming it after the variety after the chef. So it's a little bit of an idea, about the energy that's coming out of that. The other thing, though, that I think is important, because we have created a market infrastructure now which almost forces farmers to get bigger, get out. And the reason is, and again, if you look at the data, it's very revealing because again, the data that I mentioned this morning about USDA and the statistics which USDA puts out. What's very interesting is that going back to the early 1980s, the number of very small farmers, under $5,000 in gross annual sales, and the very large farmers, those with $500,000 plus gross sales, are the ones that are increasing their percentages. It's the farmers in the middle that we're losing at the greatest rate. And the conventional wisdom has always been that those farmers in the middle, which is that, roughly $50,000 to $500,000 gross sales, that they simply aren't as efficient as the big farmers, and therefore they can't compete. So it's just a natural process, and we just have to accept the fact that they're not going to make it. Well, Mike Duffy, who's a friend of mine, who's an agricultural economist at Iowa State University, he was always a little skeptical about that conclusion, that it was a matter of efficiency. And so a few years ago, he actually did a study in Iowa of real, actual operating farms in Iowa to see whether or not that was true. And what his study revealed was that those farmers in the middle, and what he found was that there were in fact increased efficiencies to be achieved up to a certain point, but only up to a certain point. And a typical corn-soybean farm in Iowa reached its peak efficiency, and by efficiency meaning output for input, right? Typical corn-soybean farm in Iowa reached its peak efficiency at about 600 to 900 acres, which everybody in Iowa would agree is a mid-sized standard farm. No further efficiencies to be gained as they got bigger. In fact, to some extent, efficiencies were lost. And you say, well, why would that be? Well, if you think about it, if you're a 600 or 900 acre farm, very likely your land is also all going to be contiguous to the farmstead. If you're doing 5,000, 10,000, 25,000 acres, a lot of that land is going to be, 50 miles, 60 miles, 100 miles from the farmstead. That's not as efficient, to plant that crops there and harvest